to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into the areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when episodes are released. Let's get started. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Jason Rogers, head of school of Rundle in Calgary, Alberta. Rundle's a group of 3 K-12 coeducational schools with nearly 1,200 students and over 200 faculty and staff. Wow, that's big. Jason has a doctoral degree in educational leadership from the University of Calgary. He also is an author of the book, The Art of Educational Leadership, and co-host of the podcast Lassoing Leadership. Did I say that right?
You got it exactly right.
Okay.
Well done, Carrie.
Perfect. Among his many interests, his passions in educational leadership are rooted in change management, school culture, innovation, design, and excellence in educational pedagogy. Outside of school, Jason has a love of family, travel, reading, and we're going to dig into that, music, and the outdoors. So, Jason, welcome to Suits and Sneakers.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is a real pleasure, Carrie. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I was just saying that I love interviewing other podcasters because you have all these insights from that. But before we go there, can you explain a little bit about how Rundle College society is structured, just so we get a little bit of background of where you're coming from?
Yeah, I think, Rundle's unique in North America with respect to it's one school. It's one Rundle with 3 distinct schools. So one of our schools, a kindergarten grade 12, it's pretty traditional. We call it a preparatory school for life, not for post-secondary. All of our students generally do go on to post-secondary, but we want them to be well prepared to give back a life of purpose, a life of, inspired leadership is what we hope for there. Class sizes are about 14 students a class there. We have another program called Rundle Academy. It's a unique program for students who have a diagnosed learning disability. So it's a grade 4 to 12 school. Same outcomes. We want our students to go on for a purposeful life, post-secondary otherwise. And so it's, again, small class size, individualized education, and so on and so forth. And the third offering is called Rundle Studio. And this is really unique. It's a virtualized school. We say it's a real school in the cloud. It's a school for kids who are deeply neurodivergent. So I think it's the only school in North America that's virtualized and for students who have neural divergence. And so really unique offering and lots of things going on there that are super interesting. So those are the 3 programs that encompass Rundle Schools. And I mean, in all the schools, again, small class size, personalized education, and really putting our values at the center. So together, be kind, be curious, be well is what we come back to in all of our programs. Yeah,
Wow.
It's a really dynamic and awesome place to be.
That's really cool. And by the way, I've heard amazing feedback from some other parents about, especially we were talking about Rundle Academy for learning disabilities. And my son actually has ADHD as well as a learning disability in writing. And so, it was one of the names that came up as an option. So yeah, definitely something to consider for anybody listening if you're having that challenge.
Well, Carrie, I spent my first 17 years there at Rundle Academy, and it is a really special place and very close to my heart. I grew up with a reading disability. My whole life, I really didn't think I would succeed or go on to post-secondary or do the things that I've been able to do in my life. And it's very, very empowering for those students to know that there is a bright future ahead of them. So yeah, Rundle Academy is a very special place in my heart, for sure.
And amazing because you've written a book. So if other people can feel like, wow, could I do that? Then absolutely there's hope for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you, prior to being the head of school, you were a teacher as well, right?
Yeah, I've spent my last 25 years here at Rundle. I came to Rundle in the year 2000. I'm from a family of teachers. So, I started the public system in Saskatchewan and moved to Alberta, stumbled into this really beautiful little program called Rundle Academy, like we talked about, taught junior high math for a stretch, and then moved into, assistant principal, head of school type roles. But probably the most engaging and most impactful part of my career was doing enrollment management and talking to families about their children's future in education and how we might be able to support them in that. And I think, seeing how we could impact families and their future and change lives was really, really special part of my career.
Yeah, amazing. What initially called you to leadership? Because I know a lot of teachers, and it seems like lots of them just love teaching. They love working with
Mm.
kids, and they don't want to do what they consider to be maybe the administration part of the job, but some see it differently. So how did you see that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Carrie. I mean, I always call myself the accidental administrator. I love the classroom and in my heart is teaching. And I think it's same for a lot of leaders across industries. You love what you do so much that eventually you start to end up being promoted and promoted, promoted. You move farther and farther away from your initial purpose of work. And I think our job is to reconcile that a little bit throughout. So, I've certainly the best days of my career were standing in the classroom, changing lives for grade 8 students, for instance. But with each move, I've reconciled it with the fact that I think I'm making a positive impact on more and more students because my, scope of influence has gotten larger and larger. And now, as you said, we have, between 1,200 and 1,300 students here. We get to shape this organization to have it to be so value centric and be focused on character. And I really think about those 1,200 students instead of maybe the 8 students in my junior high math class. And so, yeah, just one real accidental administrator, taking on one task after another, showing passion for it, developing a vision for the programs that I was leading, and now having the great opportunity of developing the vision for all of Rundle Schools.
Hmm. Well, and that brings me to sort of an interesting notion of potentially a difference in leadership in education versus in a corporate environment. How do you see those differences?
I think it depends where you're at. I mean, the independent school landscape's really interesting because we've got this, I report to a volunteer board of directors. So you've got that. I think some of the most senior leaders of public companies would do something similar. But our stakeholders are varied. We've got teachers, we have parents, and we have students, and all of them are equal stakeholders in the education that we provide. And so you have to balance off all of those needs. And I think, there's similarities and differences certainly to a corporate space, but I think you always have to think about your end user and what kind of value are they getting from your organization and from the, product that you deliver. And so our product is education. Our commodity, not really a commodity, but it's the most important thing in the world. It's the youth. And those people who are purchasing that commodity are the parents and the children. So it's a pretty complex space to be in. I think education walks a really, really complex line with all these constituents and all this value. Like there's so much value in the work we do for the children, but also for the future of our cities and for our province and for our greater communities. So I'm sure there's similarities and differences all over the place, but I think a lot of the fundamentals of leadership stay true.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, no, I think an example would be, if you believe in something, you should be in service to it. And I think this is across industry, whether it's business, education, or otherwise. And I really truly believe at the heart of great leadership is servant leadership, and being in service to the product at which you're creating or selling or promoting is really important. And I think no matter if you're a CEO of a big oil and gas company or the head of Rundle, for instance, as a leader, you've got to be willing to demonstrate that you're willing to do all parts of the work. You don't have to be the best at it. You don't always have to do it. You don't have to be a martyr and doing everything all the time. But I think you have to be in service of that product or that initiative or that vision. And I think that's a real core tenet of
Hmm.
leadership in my mind.
Yeah. And maybe an extension to being in love with the product, which a lot of people think of the product as the thing they sell or the
Mm.
service they provide, but really it's the problem that you solve for
Yes,
somebody.
yes, yes. That's a huge, huge part of it. Understanding what that problem is a big part of,
Yeah.
I think, what we all do.
Yeah. And I think for you guys, like creating an experience for students and enabling them to do more than they even thought they were capable of is a huge part of that.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think setting their future is really important, but also setting it in the right way. I recently read a book called Navigating Life, and the authors put forward 3 different mindsets. Now, we're familiar with this idea of growth mindset,
Hmm.
but they put forward 3 mindsets that aren't growth mindset. They put forward a performance mindset, which is so clear, like it's goal oriented and leads to perfectionism. passion mindset, which is, follow your passions. Like we say to so many kids or so many even new employees, follow your passion, which is very, very much intrinsically driven, but not necessarily and extrinsically levered. But then the third one, which they lean into, is called purpose mindset. And the purpose mindset is that combination of, first of all, what brings you joy and what fills your purpose cup, but also leans in on passion and on performance. And so I think for our students, we're trying to get them to balance that off in a way to be well for the rest of their life and find purpose in their life and live a life of character. We always say, when you graduate Rundle, your grades will be impressive, but they'll be the least impressive thing about you. So what will be the most impressive thing about you once you graduate? And we really hope it comes back to character and purpose. And that's a big part of our why around here.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad you landed on purpose, because passion can be a really emotionally charged word for people. They're sort of like, I don't know what I'm passionate about. That's too much pressure. But when I think about purpose, I think of like what gives you meaning and what makes you want to do the thing that you're working on right now, whether it be a math test, whether it be a product launch, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think just so much heart in purpose. I think, if we follow our purpose, it fills our cup. Whereas passion is just a little bit more fleeting. It's kind of flavor of the day is the way that I feel about passions, and I think we have to get deep and we have to explore who we are and what's our purpose so that we can fulfill that hopefully in our work and find it in our work. And I think that's the true antidote to burnout. We see so many teachers leave the profession, and oftentimes I think it's because they're a little bit misaligned with their purpose. And so we talk to our teachers quite a lot about finding their purpose inside Rundle. And if they can't find their purpose inside Rundle, then let's find a place where they can find their purpose. And that may alleviate some of this burnout stress that we see in education.
Yeah. How long do the majority of your teachers and staff stay with Rundle?
Yeah, we've been so lucky over the years, Carrie. We got our retention rates above 95% for staff. So that's year over year. Easily 60% of our staff been here for over 10 years. And we've got countless staff who've been here for 25 years or more. Our longest serving staff right now is, I believe, 32 years serving. And so it's not for everybody, but we certainly do find that if you align with the values of kindness, curiosity, and wellness, you can find a home at Rundle, and we're going to find a way to support you in your career, which is really exciting.
That is cool. How would your team describe your leadership style?
That's a good question. I think they would quickly say that, Jason fills a role of being a visionary for the school. I certainly spend a lot of time at 30,000 feet thinking about the future of education, thinking the future of society, being a little bit dreamy, but also being practical. I think they would recognize that I'm a big human connector. I spend an inordinate amount of time just connecting one-on-one with people. I'm not an email or an office boss. I'm in the hallways, on the floor, in the coffee shop kind of person. So I think, a connector, I think they would say that. And I think they would say the third thing is I've got an innovative spirit. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how we'll improve, Rundle education and maybe the world. And so I think they would say those things about me as a leader.
Very, very beautiful words that you've used there. And I'm sure they would say the same. So tell me about when you took on this role. You said that there was some challenges in the academy, going back to the academy school. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it evolved?
Yeah, I mean, when I started the academy, it was about the year 2000, and we were a very small school, and we weren't sure if we were going to succeed or if we're going to fail. And that's a really interesting thing about independent schools is there's no certainty. I actually studied schools that went from startup to sustainability as part of my graduate work in university, and we were struggling. We were small, we didn't have our identity, and so what we landed on really quickly was we needed to have a vision for our school. Right. And we came up, the motto is really what stuck, and it's "We move mountains." Rundle's a mountain. That's the name of our school. But moving mountains is what kids with learning disabilities have to do to find success. and then quickly started to develop models that would support moving mountains in education. We went from remediation to accommodation to advocacy was our model for the students in that program. And then building culture, building staff culture and building student culture. And once we started to have those pieces in place, we knew where we were headed, we had a methodology, and we knew the culture had to be at the core of that change. Things really did start to change for the better. And we had a lot of fun doing it. We were young, we were small, we were agile, and we were really hardworking. We all believed in that purpose. And it really did turn over pretty quickly. And now it's a force to be reckoned with. It's definitely a sustainable school. And we'll be looking to expand from 280 students to 460 students in the next few years as we embark on our largest capital project of all time. And so very, very exciting time for the Academy. We've come a long way in about 25 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, because there aren't that many places for people to go to get really specialized learning like that. So it's a really unique offering.
Well, I think, in the context of Calgary, and I'll say this, I just came back from Halifax, so I spent a lot of time across Canada at independent schools, whether I'm teaching courses or at conferences. And there is not another city in Canada that has the support for kids with learning disabilities that Calgary does. So, you've got Calgary Academy, Foothills Academy, you have Third Academy, you've got Rundle Academy, and others who are there to support students who have unique learning needs. And it is such a unique lighthouse of this kind of support. And I think there's a real story to be told in the national or even international landscape of what Calgary or what Alberta education is doing to support kids with learning disabilities. And, I said it off the top of the call, but we see 100% of the students graduate from Rundle Academy. When you look at the general population of students who have learning disabilities, is far, far lower than that. And then to say we have 95% of those students go on to post-secondary opportunities that they're choosing, that is almost unbelievable. And so there is something very special happening in this province in education and in these programs, not just Rundle Academy, but several others. And I'm really proud to work in this landscape.
Yeah, that's a great accomplishment. So congratulations. I want to talk about your podcast because
Yeah, let's talk about it.
it's a really unique take. Tell me about the name. Where did you come up with the name? Why, etc.?
So the short story is I teach a course every summer called Organizational Culture. And I was out in Toronto one summer teaching it. And, Ted Lasso had just finished the 3 seasons. And I was quite inspired. And I thought there was a lot of leadership lessons could be pulled through Ted Lasso. So I decided to rewrite the course, anchor it in Ted Lasso, and just see how it went. One of the participants is a person I really admire, and he's quite a leader in Canada. And he was taking the course, and he just said, we should do a podcast. We should do 3 episodes, 1 for each season, and talk about the leadership lessons in Ted Lasso. And I, kind of put it on the back burner. And then, I called it back and I said, I'll only do it if we'll do 1 episode for every episode of Ted Lasso, which was 36, I think. And he said he agreed. And then it turned into, 36 plus 14 special episodes. And now we're into season 2. So we're just north of 60 episodes of Lassoing Leadership. And the gift has been, it's just a great connector. We've been connecting with incredible people, whether it's professional athletes or CEOs or just, authors. We've had them all on the show, and we aren't specifically focusing on the Lasso episodes anymore. We're now focusing on 10 leadership themes that are drawn out of Lasso's leadership. And I think our tagline is really, we want to have more kinder, more compassionate way to lead. And I think that's really what Ted puts forward. And it's a great reminder to all of us what that might look like in our leadership, because I think leadership can be kind and definitely must be compassionate. And I think there's a lot of shining examples of that out there.
Absolutely. I found that such an interesting take because I had watched Ted Lasso as well, but I was looking at it from a coaching point of view and thought, wow, such great coaching techniques and really unique ways of shaking people up and putting them out of their comfort zone, which I keyed into that piece of it. But I wasn't really thinking about the leadership lessons, which are 100% there. What's one of the maybe 1 or 2 key leadership lessons that you uncovered from the incredibly wise Ted Lasso?
So there's so many, Carrie, but I'll lean in on 2 that come to mind first, right? So the first one is be curious, not judgmental. And I think in coaching, this would likely resonate with you. But I think throughout all of that, people run into trouble when they're not curious. When you jump to a quick conclusion. You don't ask the question. You can go all the way back to Covey, but Covey said it with like seek first, understand. That I think is tried and true. The other one, which I think goes unnoticed too often, is Ted would always say, like, be a goldfish, right? And I think there's a lot of wisdom in this in our leadership. I think we have to learn lessons, but I also think we have to have a very short memory. I think in leadership, it is too arduous a life to carry everything around all the time. You have to be kind to yourself, and you've got to find ways to compartmentalize and to have a short memory. And I think that's really been the core of a lot of my success over the years. You deal with a lot in education, you deal with a lot in leadership, but I have a very, very short memory for these things. I certainly try to be wise and try to learn from experiments, but I definitely don't carry around negative instances. I think that's really, really hard on people.
Well, and when we have a situation where there's negativity or somebody behaves in a way that maybe what didn't turn out well,
Yeah.
it's a moment in time.
Yeah.
The only time we need to really carry that or take serious action is when we see a trend or a pattern of behavior. That's different. But a moment in time is something that, yeah, we can forget about it. We look at the other side of the bowl and move on.
Yeah. And I think, I'm sure you're familiar with the book, The Four Agreements, as well, but that book is so filled with so much wisdom, and it brings us back to that. It's like, believe people are doing their best. And and I really think that kind of orientation, along with having a short mindset and along with being curious, are some of the sustaining factors in what will be very hard work in leadership, because you are certainly going to be let down. You're going to be frustrated. Sometimes you're going to feel under attack. So I think if you can lean into those things, you probably have a better chance of having like a longer, more fulfilling and a healthier career. And I think that's important.
Yeah. And then you mentioned burnout too. So using some of those strategies to just let go and
Yeah.
not have that attachment to certain outcomes or have attachment to what it means when somebody behaves a certain way to you, like inventing a story. I think a lot of leaders do that too.
Spend a lot of time in it, right? Like, I think as you invent that story, you create the story, you spend a lot of time in it, and then by the time you get around to addressing it, you've burned up a lot of time and energy. So I think that's where like coaching methodology, like you're so familiar with, comes back, is like getting curious, asking the questions, looking for clarification, seeking understanding. All those things really do work in our favor when it comes to avoiding burnout, because all of that time when you're constructing stories and ruminating about them, you're losing energy for something else that might be more important or impactful for your organization or for you.
Yeah. Maybe it's related to that, but maybe something else. What's one of the hardest leadership lessons that you've had to learn?
I don't know. I think sometimes in leadership, you do have to take the high ground, and I think you always have to take the high ground. And sometimes, in leadership, you can't tell the whole story. We've been through employee transitions several times here. And, sometimes you wish you could tell your side of the story, but you really can't tell your side of the story when we're talking about confidential HR matters. And there's almost always more to the story than anybody will know. So I think, the lesson I've learned there is that you have to build your leadership capital, your professional capital, and your personal capital before these events happen, where you are confined by, there's legalities or there's regulations. You can't always disclose everything. So if you haven't built up that capital, that personal professional capital, prior to having an incident in your organization, which there will always be an incident in every organization, no matter what kind of company you run, then you run into a problem because you got a capital deficit. And so, I think that's why it's so important to be so human, so connected, so vulnerable all of the time, not just when you need it. I think some leaders think we're going to lean into vulnerability when something bad's going on. I don't think that's the time. I think you've missed the moment. I think you always have to lean into vulnerability in your organization, and it breeds safety and purpose. And I think those are the cornerstones of culture, organizational culture, ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And really being mindful of communication, right? Like I think new leaders forget how much time it takes to communicate and with vulnerability, but also just even communicating what's coming, what's going on, what's expected, all of those things.
Yeah, tone is a hard thing, right? And I think, communicating person's always best, but we don't have that luxury. And I think many of us are keyboard warriors and we don't know what the tone is as we're sending out emails or we're communicating. And so I think, yeah, working on that, taking your time, being patient and asking for feedback is really important as we consider these pieces.
Mhm. What do you do to unwind?
That's a good question. I spend a lot of time with my family. Tom Peters once said, like, you are your calendar, right? You are what you schedule. And so I'm so mindful, Carrie, about scheduling downtime with my family. So I'm not distracted. I'm not on my phone. I'm not doing two things. And those are real blackout periods for my team. They know that I'm not getting back to them if I'm having family time. We have that every single day. Spend a lot of time with my kids in sports. And I mean, one of the very best things I did early on in this leadership career is we create a blackout time at our school from 7 to 7, right? So we don't get emails, we don't send emails, we don't communicate unless, of course, it's a urgent emergency between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. So that allows for that time to really connect. And Carrie, I have to be honest, like I am so curious about all things. When I get to listen to podcasts, when I get to read books, when I get to read articles, that's downtime for me because I just love the work. So, like I love learning so much that that is really, really relaxing for me as well.
Cool. Who inspires you?
I think, great leaders all over the place inspire me. One of my favorite things to do is to read biographies of folks who are incredible leaders. Then kids inspire me. I think they're open-mindedness, their curiosity, their acceptance, their love. I think kids of all ages really inspire me. Um, my family inspires me. My mom and dad are both in education for their whole career. And so I look up to them. They work so hard to be great educators in their own right. So they inspire me. And I just like ideas just generally inspire me, Carrie. So I just love talking to people who have interesting ideas. It's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. When you mentioned biographies, which one or two are your favorite?
Goodness. That's a good question. Michael Eisner wrote a great one about his time at Disney. Read that one a little while ago. There's a great one, actually, A Little Bird Told Me. That's about the founder of Twitter. A really good book before the Musk era, and I think that was super interesting. Had a ton of lessons. One that wasn't necessarily biography, but it was about leadership. Was called Delivering Happiness. It was by a guy named Tony Hsieh, and he founded Zappos. And unfortunately, tragically passed away a number of years ago. But there's so many life lessons in there about happiness and work culture. So those would be probably my top three at the moment. But I mean, there's you just can't not find inspiration when you're reading about other people's lives and hearing about how they've done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what about you said you're an avid podcast listener. What's one of your favorite podcasts about leadership and maybe one that would be helpful for a new leader?
Gosh, well,
Other
lassoing leadership's pretty darn
aside from
good.
suits and sneakers, I
Yeah,
mean.
suits and sneakers, lassoing leadership. Those are kind of one and two. You know what? I recently saw a guy named Gary V is what he goes by speak, and he was at the gathering in Banff. It's a great conference for any business leader. I really encourage people to go check it out. And what he said really struck me is he said, like, don't anchor yourself to a single person, idea, or thought, but always survey the environment and just see where it takes you. And he says that he sees around corners or predicts or sees the future by watching all the time and watching as much as he can. And so for me to settle in on a single podcast is really, really difficult. Every day, I take in a couple podcasts like The Daily and Front Burner. Hard Fork is one I listen to every week, and that's in tech and innovation. And then, just for fun, I pick up Smartless once a week. But, Smartless has so many lessons in there about living a really fulfilled life, and they get such incredible guests. So, it's kind of a fun one, but I listen to that one as well. And then just anything anybody recommends to me, I'm in. I'll absolutely pick it up and find time for it. So yeah, I'll take all recommendations.
Yeah, very cool. I know you even have a book list on your website, so you share some of the insights from books you've read, which is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's I try to keep keep a regular blog up. And it's selfish, right, Carrie? It's like, I think that we only really internalize ideas when we share them between 3 and 5 times. And so once I've read a book or listened to a podcast that really impacted me, my goal is to find a way to share it 3 to 5 times with people in my orbit. One of them is almost always a blog of some sort. Another one might show up on our podcast, Lassoing Leadership. And then unfortunately, my wife or my colleagues have to listen to me talk about, the book and the ideas, or the podcast and the ideas, and the article and the ideas. But I really think there's a thing called double, triple loop learning, that we have to keep cycling through these ideas, contextualizing them, and putting them into practice. Otherwise, they do tend to evaporate. And I think that's a bit of a shame. So I spend a lot of time sharing. And one of the ways I do that is through a blog.
Yeah. And it's easy as adults for us to forget that that's the effective way to learn something, and to, like you said, internalize it, is to repeat it and like say it out loud and translate how you interpret it to other people, and get their feedback on it. So it really integrates it. I like that.
I love the part of the process too, Carrie. Is like, somebody will say, that made me think of this, or have you thought of that, or this is how this works, or I disagree with that. Did you ever consider that side of it? And so I think having those critical and constructive relationships in your lives where people will challenge you on ideas, I think you only develop that through being open and sharing readily. And yeah, I'm a serial sharer. Like, I just cannot help myself on those things.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, otherwise I wouldn't have a guest today. So I really appreciate.
Thank you for allowing me to share today. You're crystallizing much of my own thinking about leadership, so I'm thankful for that.
There you go. Well, maybe on that, what advice would you give to your younger self when you first took on your first leadership role?
I think, I'd say this to anybody who's entering leadership. I would just say, like, do it your way. I think I came into this role following a head of school who had been here for 27 years. And I felt a lot of pressure to fill his shoes, and to be the leader that he was. And I probably lacked confidence myself, I know I suffered from imposter syndrome. And it's impossible now to look like to have said it to myself, but I always said, do it your way. Like, you were in this position because you've got a unique set of talents and skills. Somebody or group of people have believed in you. You can do it. But sometimes I just think it does take time to build that confidence. And I probably wouldn't listen to myself anyways, right? Like, I probably would have said, no, you're wrong. But I can say, I've been in this role for over 10 years now, and I know I'm right. And I just feel like being an authentic leader, being vulnerable and doing it your way is the most effective way to build trust and garner support from those individuals who you rely on, which is generally your whole company. So I would say do it your way.
Yeah. Well, and as much as you rely on them, they rely on you too.
Yeah, I think so. I probably rely on them.
That's great. What final advice would you give?
We've been talking a lot about this, Carrie. I think whether you're in education or whether you're in business, I think, being a real human in this day and age of technology and distance and change is really important. I think it comes back to authenticity. I think it comes back to vulnerability. I think it comes back to candor. I think a lot of these things are missing in this day and age. And I also think, like, I'm biased, but I really do think there's a kinder, more compassionate way to lead that's not like paradigms from the past. I don't think it all has to be authoritarian or top down or hyper masculine. I think there's a lot of spaces for the exact opposite of those qualities in our leadership. And I think we can believe that if we lead that way, we're going to get the same results. And I think a lot of people don't believe that. They think that results only come through being an authoritarian or having a top-down style or being hyper-masculine. I don't think any of those things are true. And I'd like to believe in my own way I'm proving that day in and day out in my leadership. And so that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, in your educational background, you would probably have studied this, but is it true that the majority of those authoritarian style leadership tenets came from really the industrial age and manufacturing? Is that right?
Absolutely. But they hang on. Like, I think that's, we do what we see or what we remember. And I think a lot of us in our era and generation saw that and understood that. And I think, Harvard's done some really, really good work around you'll appreciate this, but that kind of authoritarian leadership is likely in the bottom third of effectiveness when it comes to motivating your organization to succeed. And the number one most effective way to lead is a coaching methodology. And that is that whole thing that we've been talking about here is, how do you get curious, and how do you get close, and how do you stay human, and how do you ask the important questions so the mentee can, or the coachee can, go on and solve their own problems. And I think that's how we build capacity in organizations. We can talk about sustainability all day long, but I think that's exactly where that starts, is through coaching methodology. And I think leaders can have a better impact on their organizations if they actually understand the styles of leadership that are out there and become students of leadership. I think that's a really important professional growth opportunity for us.
Because we never know everything.
No, we hardly know anything.
Yeah,
It's true.
exactly. We're constantly learning.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great opportunity just being a student. I love that. It's come full
absolutely.
circle back to
Yeah,
education, right?
there it is. There it is. No, I think that's a magical place to end up for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for being here and for everything that you shared today. I know that our guests are going to have tons of comments and questions for me. So we will provide your contact info in the show notes and your website, as well as some of the resources that you mentioned. So thank you again.
Amazing. Thanks for having me, Carrie. This is really great, and keep up the great work.
We're glad you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest, look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to be notified of future episodes.